Hello and welcome to video number 4 of the Arabian VACC S2 Training Tier 1 Endorsement series. And we are now going to continue where we left off from last time, where we had just started diving into separation techniques and methods and minima. So we talked about IFR separation, and again, by the way, still me, Shazin. Let's continue with this. So to review, as I'm sure you must be knowing by now, 2 aircraft. Whoops, sorry. Yeah, there we go, that'll do it. So 2 aircraft that followed the same prescribed track that needs instruments to follow, needs 2 minutes of separation. 2 minutes. Okay. But hold on a second. What if... So this little story here, we're not really thinking much about the aircraft because they come in all shapes and sizes. Literally, no, I mean literally, they come in different shapes and sizes. As I'm sure you know, you have different categories for how big a plane is. So why are we quote-unquote fat-shaming aircraft here? Well, it comes down to a phenomenon known as wake turbulence, which, as it turns out, is our next type of separation. So, wake turbulence. So what's really happening here? So, please forgive me if you're an aeronautical engineer or even a pilot, because this is a terrible drawing of an airfoil, but the wing of an airplane sort of cuts through the air in such a way where it manipulates how fast or slow the air is flowing. Because air at the end of the day is a fluid. And fluids, when they speed up or slow down, they do other things as well. As a guy named Bernoulli once said, as per Bernoulli's principle, wings sort of work in a way where you have low pressure here and high pressure here, because there is a relationship between pressure and the velocity of air, or velocity of fluids. So high pressure air here means this fluid or this air has slowed down, this air has sped up. So you have low pressure, high pressure here. And because of this pressure differential, as per all things in nature, there's a tendency to want to sort of equalize, and you get this sort of upward force, which now becomes lift. And this is how wings generate lift. Fantastic. You now know why planes fly. Well, one of the reasons why planes fly, but that's a start. So why am I teaching this? Well, and again, you know, I'm not a... That's not the most scientific explanation, so give me some rope here. But why is that important? Well, if we now look at it from the front, something kind of happens. So, and let's just do that. I'm not going to bother drawing the engines and stuff. Just you can kind of visualize this as an aircraft in flight. And you got the lift sort of acting upwards. But something interesting happens here. Something bizarre happens here, actually. So the way the air just sort of pushes up, it sort of pushes up like this with this force and just sort of travels along the length of it. And by the time it reaches here, it just sort of spirals, right? Spirals, and because the aircraft is moving, you have all this sort of air that, so I'll just kind of clean this up a bit. So it sort of spirals off the wingtip. And then, in addition to that, because you have forward moving, you know, you're moving forward, so all that air that sort of comes like this, that then pushes this sort of vortex, as it's called, backwards. So now it no longer strikes the wing, and it just continues. In fact, it continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger in these sort of concentric circles until eventually they dissipate harmlessly into the ground. But not so harmless while they're in the air. So we'll talk about that in a second. So we'll just draw these like this. So this now generates wake turbulence. So now think about this. if I have an aircraft that is about the same size, or even bigger, sort of stuck in that wake turbulence there, say this aircraft had departed a couple moments ago, but then the wake turbulence itself, kind of got myself into a little bit of pickle here. Hopefully that, nope. Bear with me, guys. There we go. Okay. So that aircraft must have departed a couple minutes ago, but the wake turbulence still sits. Is there a way I could reverse this? No. Okay. I'll just draw it from scratch then. Whoops. Okay. Something like this. And we're now dealing with it in this direction now. Right? And let's say this is your runway. Along this entire way is your runway. And this aircraft gets caught in this turbulence. But it was the same size of aircraft, so it's not that big of a deal. But what if this plane was much, much smaller? Much smaller. And what if you now get caught in this? You can kind of already see it, can't you? Well, folks, let me tell you a little story. Once upon a time, an Emirates A380 back in 2017 flew 1,000 feet over a Challenger business jet. And as they got caught in the wake turbulence produced by the A380, the aircraft was flipped upside down and did 5 complete rolls. And somehow the pilots heroically stabilized the aircraft, but not without sustaining some damages, as you can see, and some injuries. Not pretty. So now, if you're a tower controller, you best bet that you can't just depart planes one after the other if one guy is bigger than the other guy. So if you got a little small guy here and a heavier guy here, or a bigger guy here that has more turbulence that produces, this guy needs to wait for a bit until the turbulence sort of dissipates. Right? By the way, if you want to visualize wake turbulence, just take a look on Google Images and look at a plane flying through a cloud. You'll see it forming right there. Look at that. Absolutely beautiful. Here's another one. So, yeah. You have to think about wake. So, obviously, ICAO has also thought about wake and established different types of categories. What are those categories? We have this. Light, medium, heavy, super. Based off of takeoff weight. So what ICAO has done is loosely translate the size of the airplane to the maximum certified takeoff weight, which makes sense, you know. Aircraft with higher takeoff weights generally, because they can accommodate that much more weight, it's designed to carry more passengers, therefore it needs more room, therefore it's a bigger plane. It's a pretty simple way to think about it, and the way that ICAO has classified it is as per light, medium, heavy, and super, with these weights right here. Now, per these weights, you have to apply some timings. Okay, so let me just bring this here for a second. Oh, not sure why I did that. Okay, hang on. There we go. Alright, so as this thing says right here, let's say an aircraft who is a medium aircraft is lined up on the runway, and a heavy aircraft has departed. Heavy aircraft is in the air, departed. So the heavy aircraft is in front, medium is behind. Heavy is your leader, medium is your follower. So follower, the follower is a medium, your leader is a heavy, and you just kind of draw this out to see where they meet, and look at that, they need 2 minutes of separation. As you can see, anywhere there's a star, there's no separation requirement. So if it were instead if this guy was a super instead, an A380 or an Antonov, it becomes 3 minutes. So this guy now needs to wait 3 minutes. So there you go. He needs to wait 3 minutes. So this guy can't get a takeoff clearance unless you start timing it. And it should be 3 minutes before this guy can start a takeoff run. Make sense? There you go. That's done. Similar sort of situation, but for arrivals, we now have distances to play with. The exact same thing. So if you have a heavy aircraft who's on the approach, so something like this. I know this is not to scale exactly. And let's put a light aircraft behind it, a very light aircraft, very small aircraft. They need some kind of distance between them. So again, we already talked about, we talked about IFR, right? But we're now actually thinking about their aircraft categories. And because this is a light and this is a heavy, light following a heavy needs 6 nautical miles, as it turns out. And again, wherever you see a star, if they were the same type, for example, so if this guy was actually much bigger, or even the same size, this again can be overruled and brought back down to 3, as we've established before. But no, we're factoring in wake, so it's 6 nautical miles. Again, if we don't do that, bad things could happen, right? So there you go, that's your equivalent. So what are we doing here? We are applying wake turbulence separation. There are different timings for different categories, as you can see. A follower and a leader chart. And same with distances. So I'll just write it down as wake turbulence separation. So WTS. And we're effectively doing the exact same thing, but with distances on the arrival side. Here we're using timings, here we're using distances. Wake turbulence separation. Alrighty.